Thanks so much, Richard. And I really enjoyed hearing from Tom and Greg and their comments. And it was interesting to hear the spotlight on collaboration. I actually wrote the first book on collaboration about 15 years ago and defined it as well within the literature, the academic literature. So you've got me totally connected to that reality, because a lot of the journey in AI is really the inclusiveness and diversity and ensuring that you iterate consistently throughout and you never stop. Before I get underway, I just have one observation. I really believe that we're at a point where the literacy is so critical. We in business, for example, and I've got a business background, but I used to program many years ago. They just moved me along into business leadership roles, mainly because I like to communicate and simplify things. But we all had to learn what a P&L was, right? A balance sheet, an income statement. And I think we're at an inflection point now that to really drive the growth in these fields, we have to normalize some of the language. You may not be an expert, but you definitely need to understand some of the approaches and the methods, because otherwise, how can you lead if you can't inspect? So, it's a deeper conversation. It's a passion of mine. And that's probably why I've been writing in the Forbes channel to really decompose some of these key points. So thanks, Tom and Greg. And for all of those who are international, I glanced through the chat room, and it was wonderful to see that people are here from Peru and India and Beirut and Canada and the US. And so accolades to Richard and the team that have organized this, and Giselle, because you have an international audience. And that makes these, really, quite remarkable. And I'm squirreled away in Toronto, Canada right now. We're in a pretty severe lockdown again with COVID-19. Husband's next door, I think, and we usually rendezvous around now. So if he comes in with some food for me, just know that I'm being well looked after. Now, I'm going to break this into sort of four key things. I'm going to talk a little bit about the book, not much, just want to let you know there is a discount because it just came out. So I asked our publisher to allow a discount. So, when you share the slides, that that's up, and I think the discount's out for a few weeks. This particular book was really designed to look at different industries and their applications of AI. But the underlying premise is could go in one of two ways right now. There's a huge surge in growth in AI, yet there's a lot of concerns, and it's coming out pretty well pervasively now. This is a very recent stat that just came out with the Venture Beat. And I know it's hard sometimes to step back and say, why worry about the AI models moving into production? However, when we get comments like 87% of the AI projects will never make it into production, so they're providing sort of decision-making advisory, and AI only delivers values if the models are deployed. What happens is you get tremendous concern from the finance group, right, and the financial side. And then as the CEOs look at their investments that they're making in these infrastructures in the enterprise, they start really wondering a little bit about where is the ROI and how long do they need to sustain the journey. So I do think things could go either way over the next few years. We could be getting in, heaven forbid, another nuclear winter, right? In the sense of the winter period we went through many years ago. And Tom, you may remember that, as well. As a lot of it's in the history. Some of us are, not old enough to remember some of those dynamics, but AI isn't new, right? It's more that we've got the incredible investments in infrastructure in terms of things moving to the cloud. We've got the processing power, we've got the increased recognition in business of building these capabilities to move out. But I just think it's a note of pause how important the collaboration and communication is given that dynamic. So one of the things I thought I could do is really step back and, we could spend an entire day on ethics, if not, months. There are so many dynamics within this field to think through wisely. I've just put a little bit of a smattering of a number of them. I'm not going to drill too much on the data bias risk because a lot of you are coming from the foundations as data engineers or data scientists or data specialists. And so the importance of that. I'm going to talk more about the governance risk and the communication aspects, and that how often I see those gaps missing on communicating back up to C levels. And sometimes these projects are squirreled away. And that's actually the wrong strategy. They need to be visible. The executive sponsorship needs to be real. Otherwise, your odds of securing returned investment, downstream are really, much more compromised. Yesterday, I did a session with Dr. Danny Lang. Some of you may know of Danny. He's the former data scientist, very senior, that was at Amazon, but also at Microsoft, but now he's the chief data scientist at Unity Technologies. And we had a discussion with him and the global head of Ernst & Young, Kathy Kobe, who runs the AI practice worldwide for Trusted AI. And it was interesting just to hear the emergence and in terms of perspectives of where do you get started in AI. And Danny's premise was that, try and look through the enterprise, and this is at a larger company perspective, not a small business perspective. Try and find multiple project initiatives and seed a number of enablement structures. And then if you think about wrapping a collaborative DNA, because one might not seed. So it reminded me of, when I was a venture capitalist, what would we do? Right? We would basically, shore up our bets, right? So maybe only 1 in 10 would have a breakthrough. So there may be some interesting linkages that we could take to seeding AI, getting it to production, but also educating business that it's a seeding strategy, and some will deliver fruit, but that 1 out of 10 can have that big bang, right? And justify the investment over all the other initiatives. So I'm probably right on that. I just think that there's some analogies, right? And when you see stakeholders leave an organization, right, where you may have had a business executive who was extremely, I'd say, curious, probably first and foremost, and really wanted to see the data science team and go on the journey of the data discovery and see the value that they may derive some new insights from. But let's say that that senior executive leaves the organization, if you haven't built some of that broader success across the organization, things can come to a screeching halt. And those hits and misses, or the long tail, they're very hard, and they can be very discouraging to the data scientists or data engineers, who often may not have the skills to basically sell. So I think one of the points I would encourage all of you here is to build up your skills in communication and build up your skills in selling and speaking the language so that your dreams can come true with your discoveries. So, that, and I know you stressed, Tom and Greg, the aspect of storytelling and the visualization. There has to be an oral enablement as well, because the visualizations only go so far. So earlier in my career, I was very involved in Toastmasters. So I always recommend to people, if you haven't built out a public speaking platform, try. I wasn't as, the word wasn't as strong maybe when I was a whole lot younger, but I spent a lot of time working on, how could you persuade an audience? How could you communicate? I took courses at the university. I learned the power of voice to alter your voice, right? And to, when you want people to listen, you really should pause a whole lot more and try and bring some intrigue in. So just a few perspectives there on, some of the dialogue. I think probably as I've been continuing my journey, I think that collaboration requires dialogue, right? And dialogue is a skill. It's an oratory skill. And it's something that, I often see in my own engineers, right? And we work hard to get them out in front, so they actually have to sell their ideas to the clients. This slide, I'm not going to drain, there's all kinds of ethical risks to think through. Obviously, if you took any major international AI ethical framework, they would always have 4 constructs. Doesn't matter. I mean, you look at the European Economic Union, if you look at the Asian framework, if you look at the US or Canada, they'll always have a point of view on data bias, and the importance there, and I think you all know that. They'll always have a point of view on explainability and also accountability. And then obviously privacy and security risks would be probably the main ones. I don't think we stress enough the talent risk. And what I mean is that the skills in this area are in high demand, and they need to be recognized. They also need to be nurtured more. They can't be just squirreled away in the research labs and building visualizations and doing data discovery. It's really important, I believe, in my heart of hearts, that that talent have an opportunity to educate the C-levels. I'm a big believer in bringing them up and exposing them to the C-levels of the board, so they can help, educate, other folks that may not have the knowledge. So you have to create a cultural context. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to zoom into a very specific case. It's one that we've been involved in for nearly 3 years. The company's over a $1.3 billion company. They have over, I think it's close to probably 13 or 14,000 employees. I probably have to update this slide, across North America in 2 businesses, both B2B and B2C. They have a very comprehensive operating infrastructure. Just to give you a context, they have SAP for mainly their ERP, so that would involve their financial management system, that would involve their HR system, and then in terms of their CRM foundation, customer relation management, from pre-sales to post-service, they have a Salesforce infrastructure. And then some of the data that's in the SAP environment, the business users, have created their own servers, and they've extracted data so that they can have their own little enablement labs. They've got Power BI in there, and probably 2 other mainstream visualization tools. The use case there was very much twofold. One was, how could we predict the future outcomes for sales? So we started there, and we were leveraging a variety of machine learning approaches. It was interesting, Tom, and we were talking about linear regression as being an initial entry point for discovery, and we actually started on linear. Then we moved to random forest, then we moved to gradient boosting, then we added in sentiment mining, and then we started to advocate additional mathematical constructs, and now we have some other NLP methods. So we've managed to get on the sales side to predict outcomes of whether an opportunity to be won or lost. In some of the accounts, we're running at actually 95% accuracy. Which you can just imagine. In this account, we're probably running around 87%. But that's been through 3 years, adding additional methods, adding more data to the model. All the features, have gone through additional expansion in terms of what's gone into the model. And the client's been very involved in the process. The business side, the sales senior VP, the directors, the managers are validating the inputs and the sense making. And we have an audit trail as well in the tech stack, which I can't stress enough, is what you say is going to happen for prediction as an outcome. Did it happen, yes or no? And how do you know, in fact, that it did happen? That's where the magic is. What I would say in terms of the, sort of that journey that we went on, we always start off with the big question. And I know, Tom, you guys stress that as well, and Greg in your talk. In other words, what, if you could wave your magic wand, what would you like to see? What would be the desired outcome? What is the business problem? How big is it? Obviously, the bigger the problem, the likelihood there's more data, and obviously these methods might be justified from an investment. I can't tell you enough the challenges that we've experienced in pretty well all of the accounts on the data environment. It was interesting, Tom, that you're talking about sample data, and then obviously the implications of, a fit as you get more and more of the data, and that is so true. The company has moved into moving all of their data into Amazon, so it's a huge, huge investment into centralizing the data that's in the various repositories. That's a journey that they're underway. With the work that we've been doing, obviously the data lineage has very much been part of the ongoing, I'd call it. It hasn't left the reality check of the data environment. We often say data is a strategic asset. We know as AI specialists or data scientists how important it is to get access to data. But that data for accessing and ensuring that it can be sustained and not so much effort to pull it together, really is, I honestly think that CEOs, and pardon my language, and board directors need to be spanked on that, because data is such an underpinning of enablement, and it needs to be treated as seriously as a financial statement. I can't stress that enough. In terms of this particular company, the sponsorship has been incredible. It's not just the senior VP of sales, it's the CFO and a very visionary CIO, but it's not one person. They have an advanced data analytics and AI team that's actually at a director level, and the director reports into the CIO of advanced analytics, and then the individuals that are in the revenue operations side report into the CFO and the CMO. So, it's quite a mixed group, but the executive sponsors are actively involved, and as results are identified in cost savings, they're executed immediately, and there's a very detailed tracking mechanism, which makes a big difference, because when you can show that you've invested $1 million and maybe you've got now all of a sudden an $8 million return on investment for that research, then you can actually fund the next phase. And obviously the whole objective is to get to a production environment, but it takes time to build that enablement, especially when the data maybe isn't all there that you need. And so you're into a very iterative stage. So one of the things we try and do and communicate to the executives right off the bat is, I won't get involved in any client engagement unless I know I've got executive C-level sponsorship. We won't take on any middle management work. And it's only because AI is not a short game. I do golf. It's a long game. And you don't want to be in an account that's just doing some emergent work. Because you'll do good work, you'll add value, but your odds of success, if you don't have that executive sponsor upstream already pre-planted for the bigger nut for investment, they haven't bought in, they haven't been educated, right? And so I think in these areas, you're best to really ensure you've got executive sponsorship as a clear call out, or move on to another account. Life's too short, and if COVID's taught us anything, is resilience and speed, and seeing the dynamics that are working to help drive maybe your wingspan, how important they are. We've been able to see in this account 85 to 95% accuracy in the models, and we just finished doing some experimentation on the sentiment mining side, by looking at analyzing all the notes on their major accounts. So, in sales, and I'm a former Xerox sales gal, so the account management process in enterprise is so important, and taking really good notes. So analyzing all the notes across all of the enterprise accounts using NLP, has revealed maybe a 2 to 3% uplift in the modeling, because good account executives record, and so you can start getting into the language a little bit. It's not a huge uplift, but if you're working at, say, 85% and you can uplift the model accuracy by another 3 points, that's great. I mean, just think about being able to look at the lifetime value prediction of your accounts in terms of growth and return. This particular slide here is just a very simple framework about, and it's just more of a reinforcement, because I've got one on a slide and want to move it to questions and get us to the panel. Formulating the strategy, was very much driven by the business. They knew the business problem that they wanted to solve. In the case of the sales VP, his objective was to be able to predict the future, so he didn't spend time on chasing, exactly his words, the duds. So by ranking and predicting things, we actually flow through all the opportunities are ranked as to where you should spend your time. And we initially stratified into A, B, C, D, F. We use very simple language in our software, and language that business people can quickly grasp. and salespeople and inside sales understand pretty quickly that an A is much better than an F. We peel the onion back as well so that they can easily understand why. Did it come in from a good lead channel? Was it in the price range that has the relevance that the other deals have been won on the most frequently? Even your win rate, you know, if Cindy's a star and I'm always closing my my sales cycles, well, that plays out in terms of a predictive model is look at the win rate of the different individuals. So kind of goes back to the discussion that Tom and Greg said is the feature engineering side and really diving in and continuing to improve that makes a difference. What this company's also done is they've really done a lot of work on governance. You know, they're evolving. They have the C-levels all lined up. They report up to the president the results. They have brought together an integrated team, you know, of practitioners. They're constantly learning, but they're very still much in the doing side. In terms, they're not quite at the broader portfolio side where I would say, you know, because right now I would say they have two major initiatives that are foundational. The eye on the horizon is really probably the next phase of work that'll probably start next year. I'd like to close on this framework. We're quite close to Ernst & Young. I mean, I'm a former Accenture partner, and it won't really matter if you go into IBM's literature or into Accenture or Deloitte's. They all have a framework around the importance of an operating life cycle. But I do often see that data scientists start the journey before really getting really clear on the business drivers, the I call it the stakeholder alignment, the stakeholder knowledge in the journey. So they don't set themselves up for success sometimes. And if the business isn't trying to set that up for success, there will be risks downstream. So can't stress enough the governance and the articulation of the problem, the key performance indicators, getting that all in writing, getting that approved, putting a outlook on the value and the return that you think you can derive right from the beginning, rather than waiting to say, look and see. So that language context, you know, is really important to ground the team. You know, in terms of the whole data wrangling aspect, as we've all stressed the challenges in there, I think we could probably all tell some horror stories too. You know, one that comes to my mind is the SAP data, you know, what to call it, expert that understood the data in the SAP environment, those in the business. They didn't actually have a document that explained what each of the field attributions were and what they meant and the math under them in terms of the formulas, because through evolution, they'd customized the workflows. So it was like this big spaghetti that you had to untangle. And we could have started on our side very easily in building a model without that clarity, right? Because things emerge with these algorithms. But what does that do, right? People don't understand. And so we wanted to ensure that every single field had a working definition, the data dictionary was put into place, and you know that there were owners. So I'm sure as you and your various projects, you probably have seen this, but to jump into the emergence without maybe really ensuring that the ship's deck is structured effectively. I think that's like building, like, you know, I think we all remember the Three Little Pigs when we were growing up, right? It's like building an AI model on a house, you know, that you could blow over just with a few whiffs from the good old wolf. So, you know, I really like strength and foundations and rigor. I come more from that approach than just only whipping things together and then hoping things emerge. So this is, you know, a life cycle. It'll be in the materials. And just to close out, if I had to sort of say 5 lessons that I've certainly learned, and we've worked in diverse industries now, you probably have the consistent echo on governance. And that's why I'm writing for board directors and CEOs and very much trying to give them the context of what their roles are and their duty of care. and how important this is for us to really get the return for the incredible investments, but also in terms of all of the beautiful, young people that have, bet their careers on data science and AI. Right now, there's an incredible high demand. But if the noise doesn't start to articulate the benefits, and if Gartner Group shows we're in the valley of despair consistently in their research, and IDC, et cetera, we will start to see a retrenchment. And I'm not sure which way things are going to go. Obviously, I think when we get out of COVID, I think it's going to be a very positive surge for growth. I think there's untapped energy, but it's something to keep your eye on in your projects to make sure you have a value framework and that there is a value in return clearly signed off by the business. And I say signed off by the business because the business has to understand the work and the business has to be able to advance on these insights. And there should be a dollar value attached to them versus just qualitative. Usually if it's fully qualitative, you will not sustain the executive suite's support of the programs over the long term. The other thing I've learned is how important it is for the talent to match the right talent for the right use case. So I do see often, that the companies will hire a data scientist and maybe an AI engineer, but they don't have any background on the specific use case the business wants to solve. And the business and the recruiting didn't understand that there are different skills and different knowledge. And so that's another area, again, why it's so important to educate the business to make sure they understand the use case and they've got the right recruiting firm advising them on the skills that are needed, or the right technical leader in their team that understands the variance. And a lot of CIOs do not understand the differences of the different engineering methods. They simply don't. And if they haven't been trained and schooled in this area, they will, pardon my language, F blank, blank, blank up, right? They just will. And the business executive, the CEO, is really entrusting them to get it right. And yet the CEOs don't necessarily know the kind of skills and the variances that you need in an organization. So there's why so much, I think, foundation is on the educational front. So I'll just simply close and say AI is a long game. It's not a short game. I'd be glad to field any questions. I'm very passionate about this space. I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing in our accounts and also what I've learned over the years, from change management and communication and collaboration, but also digging in hard to learn the language of the engineering side. I've spent a lot of time, went back to school, studied at MIT, really tried to understand the different algorithmic approaches, brushed up on my math so I could ask the right questions of the engineering team. But I've also learned they can hide behind their disciplines and not be able to articulate clearly the business side. And so usually I know then in the recruiting side, we may have a major skill gap. So I do look now very much for a blend of skills in recruiting, that somebody can actually explain things in simple terms and tell a story around it to engage the audience. It's all about, I guess we could close on the collaborative aspect of communicating effectively and efficiently to drive an outcome. Thank you very much for having me as a guest, and hello from Toronto, Canada.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Cindy. What a great talk. And, it is great to see the key challenges that people need to focus on, not just the bias part of it, but the talent risk or the privacy risks, the sustainability risks, to name a few. And of course, you have put the whole list. Around 12 were already there on your slide that I could see. And I think the case study is so important, and mentioning that AI is not a short game. It is a long game, and educating the business and basically the digital education and understanding of AI is so important to bring a collaborative approach. And I think the key behind it is communication. And thanks for highlighting how important public speaking is in order to get that collaboration, in order to get the questions right, in order to, make your model work correctly, and have the strong governance and the frameworks which are running onto your models, which can never be forgotten, so that we have the responsible and explainable AI. Definitely, this is the key that people should look at. And thank you so much.